Hey guys, I felt kind of bad that the second half of that episode got that squeal in it about, reloading and explaining reloading. I tried to fix it. I tried to re-upload it, and it just I can't figure out how to fix it. So, that's my bad. I do apologize. I thought, hopefully you can still listen to it. Hopefully you can tune that out. I recently got some damage to some recording equipment. I'm trying to figure out the new stuff. I appreciate it. I know the audio quality never been super stellar, right? But working through that, I appreciate you guys. I thought that maybe I would do a little bonus content because one of the Soviet leaders said, quantity has a quality all its own. So I'm going to shotgun blast this out here and talk about some of my favorite powders and primers and projectiles for reloading, just that I've used over the years, over time. Okay, so let's get started. One of my all-time favorites for all-around high-powered rifle stuff is Varget. Varget is great. If you have something that will take Varget and it's a good load for it, Varget is fantastic. It's a temperature-stable powder, meaning if you're hunting in 80 degrees or minus 20 degrees, it's way less likely to be affected by temperature. Varget is great. It tends to meter well, which is important if you're hand loading in a lot of different reloading stuff. If you have a standard powder measure where it's like throwing powder, meters pretty well. I really like it for all around. It's, a classic reloading powder, but 308, fantastic for that. Lots of other cartridges too. 243. It's a great powder. I like Varget. It's, again, for your standard cartridges, it may not work too well in Magnums or super tiny cartridges, but general purpose cartridges, if you see a good load that you're interested in, it takes Varget. Varget is a good recommendation there. So I like Varget. I also have I really like Benchmark. Benchmark seems to work really well, tends to meter well. It gives me really consistent groups. As of recently, I like Benchmark. It's a good all-around rifle powder. If we talk about pistol powders, I really like 700X. It's a good all-around standard pistol cartridge. It's fairly affordable as far as powders go. 700X, it's a good shotgun powder. It's a good powder for 9mm, 45. It's just a good all-around pistol powder. 38 special, right? It's a good all-around powder. It's kind of like a flake circular powder. Works really well. It's you don't tend to use a lot of grains, so you get a lot of grains per pound, so it tends to be economic to run. And also, it tends to have a bit of volume, which means it's easier to notice if you double charge a case, which you can do in pistol, especially like a 38 special. That's a giant case for a small amount of powder. So you want a powder with some volume so that if you double charge it, meaning you throw two charges in there, you can notice it. If you have a powder that may be a good powder but has very little volume and you throw it in a big case, it can be really hard to tell even if you check if you've got 2 or 3 loads of powder in there, and that can be dangerous, catastrophically so. So that's just one thing to think about. I like 700X for all-around pistol. If I want a little bit hotter pistol or a little bit more specialty load, maybe going for accuracy, I like Tight Group. Tight Group is a very good pistol powder, also a shotgun powder, but a very good powder I've used over the years. I like it. Let us talk about some primers. One of my go-to primers is Federal. I like Federal Gold, or the Federal Match primers for rifle. I like Federal primers for pistol. Why? Because Federal, they tend to be accurate. I'm not saying they're always the most accurate, but they tend to be accurate. And Federal tends to have the softest primers. So if you shoot a lot like I do, you shoot competition, which I do, guns can get dirty, stuff can get in firing pin channels, and those can go off when other primers won't. Like a really hard primer, like a NATO primer, they're notoriously hard. So I tend to prefer Federal primers, not for everything. If I was loading a ton of ammo that I wasn't going to shoot for a really long time, and it was for deep storage, right, I might go with a NATO primer. But for general purpose stuff, I tend to prefer Federal primers, Federal pistol primers, large or small, and the Federal match primers if I'm doing any kind of accuracy rifle stuff. If I'm just loading a bunch of 223 or something, not super critical. But I tend to like the Federal primers. Not sponsored by Federal, not sponsored by Hodgdon or anything, right? But I tend to like those. For projectiles, it really depends on what you want the projectile to do. If we're talking about high volume, extreme bullets, they make really good copper-plated pistol bullets that are very affordable. Rainier also, but I really like the extreme bullets. They work really well. I've won a lot of competitions with those bullets. They're affordable. They're clean. What I mean by that is they're not just like lead. They're not going to put a bunch of lead in your bore. They're very good. They make a lot of the common stuff, 9mm, 45, 40 Smith & Wesson, right? They even make some, like cheap, they used to make, I haven't loaded this load in a while, but like really affordable 55 grain 223. So yeah, they make that. That's extreme. They're a smaller company, but very good. Just, if you're doing more specialty stuff like varmint, a bullet I really like are the varmint grenades, the 36 grain varmint grenades in a 22 cal. Whether you're talking 22 250 or 223, they are phenomenally, almost alarmingly devastating on very small animals. So if you're trying to eradicate, rodents that carry the bubonic plague or something, or trying to help out a farmer or a rancher to get rid of problem animals, those varmint grenades are legit. They're not like a marketing gimmick. They're, again, kind of astounding, kind of alarming at the damage they do to small game. Wouldn't use them on anything bigger unless it was like a real survival situation and it's all you had, but they're devastating on very small, light animals. Moving up into deer, it really depends. You're going to have to find out what your gun likes. So some places I would tell you to start, if you're hunting with a fairly standard caliber for deer, like 308 or something like that, you might look at the Sierra Hot Cores. Those are very affordable, very good hunting bullets. I also really like the Sierra Game Kings. I've used those, many things with those. Sierra Game Kings, very good. Parry, they're one of those with some Varget, and you're probably going to have a decent load if it shoots well out of your gun for hunting and more, high-end stuff. Obviously, Nosler partitions are a gold standard. I would have no problem recommending those for appropriate game. But I tend to prefer the Barnes TSXs. I've been using those a long time. Before they were even like legislated in California. That I was using those and experimenting with those. So yeah, the Barnes TSX, TTSX, I think the LRX is also in that line, although I haven't used those. But any of the Barnes solid coppers. I know there's other companies that have gotten into solid copper, but the TSXs, I mean, there you can be very accurate. I would not recommend you do what you normally do if you're trying to get super accuracy with a bullet and like load them long so they're almost touching the lands. Go with what they recommend for like an overall length and jump to the lands. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. But they play by different rules. But generally, you can go quite a bit lighter in a caliber. Just for instance, right? If you generally run a 150 grain bullet in a cup and core lead core bullet in a 308, you could easily go down to 130 grain, get more velocity, more performance, and I think they're still going to outperform 150 grain or even 168 grain maybe in that similar caliber because they're so good on game. So the Barnes TSXs can't, even if you don't live in a socialist republic, even if you don't live in somewhere that mandates them, you may want them, not because you care about condors, right? You may or may not because you care about eating lead in your game, you may or may not, but just because they do really well, they perform really well. So you may consider the Barnes. They're not cheap, but if you talk about premium hunting bullets, which those are, a lot of those aren't cheap. Like, right, Nosler A-frames aren't cheap. Swift A-frames aren't cheap. Nosler partitions aren't cheap. None of the really high premium bullets are cheap. TSXs, when you compare them to premium hunting bullets, are right in there. They're not super expensive compared to that. They're not for high volume range practice, but they're good bullets. Alright guys, just a quick short episode on some of my favorites. I hope this was beneficial. I hope it makes up for a little bit of the mess up on the latter half of today's episode. I really appreciate you guys and all that you do. I know the audio quality, again, not super great lately. I've been working a ton at the private security contracting job. I hope you'll forgive the idiosyncrasies and foibles in the audio quality for the content. I appreciate you guys. Hopefully, the schedule will lighten up in a bit. I appreciate you guys sticking with me and all your support. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.